Good people. It's two guys that I think you've seen a couple of times before on here talking to you about sports, right? A couple times at least. Um, One half of the tag team champions. It's your boy Cool McCain, and I'm joined as always by my other half.
That would be your boy, Stephen Box.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if it's your first time, if it's your 80th time, or anywhere in between, I think it's only fair if we reasonably just let you know who he is, old school. So let's go.
The play callers.
So, good people, we in the building. Lots to talk about from the world of sports. So the simple thing is to get into it. So I think the most reasonable place to start would be the NBA, right? Because we just had the finals, game one, everything kind of sliding through, some thoughts and reactions and all that good stuff. So, Box, man, let's break it down here so we can kind of talk about some different things. So the first thing I'll talk to you about is, what did you think about Luka's performance in game one?
So, full disclosure here, I actually had a previous obligation and I did not get to watch any of the game last night at all. I just saw the final. I saw that there was a point in the third quarter when Dallas did make a comeback to cut into a 29-point deficit, but that obviously did not last since they actually lost the game by 18 points. So I'm going to leave that to you, sir, because I did not get a chance to watch it, and I have not had a chance to watch any highlights yet today. Been a little bit hectic. Okay. You throw the mic to the man, and he just disappears on you. What's going on with that? So I guess we will sit here and wait for Mr. Kane to come back because, as I said, unfortunately, due to some other obligations, I did not get a chance to watch the game last night. So I was looking forward to my co-host filling me in on what happened on game one. What allowed Boston to have such a dominant victory in game one and what they were able to do. But I guess we all have to wait for that now. So if you're joining us live in the chat, drop a what's up. Let us know that you're here. As always, you know how we like to do interactive. Well, he was back for a second. This is the joy of live people.
All right, so I was able to watch the game. So Luka, one of the things I talked about was Luka being very conservative, maybe looking like he was a little scared. Maybe the moment was too big for him. As a scorer, I would say the moment wasn't too big for him. Boston came out with extreme athleticism, ball hawking defense, and Porzingis snapped in the first half. So a lot of things went bad very quickly and early for Dallas in this game. Boston came out like they've been listening to all the people talking about how they had an easy schedule and, acting like only one team had to play anybody worth noting, the other team didn't. And I think they were motivated. Joe Mazzulla, a couple of weird things, but for the most part, he actually coached a fairly decent game. I was actually impressed with how well he actually coached the game. It's not something you see. I say a lot about Joe Mazzulla. I feel like he's one of the weak links of Boston. They got to a big lead early. Over the course of the game, they kind of let Dallas back in. And because Luka scored 30 points and the rest of the starters scored 39, a lot of it was Luka making shots or making plays. He's going to have to get more out of everybody else. It kind of looked like what I expected from this Dallas team in the last round, which is Luka attempting to hog the ball at the top of the key and be a ball dominant guy, even when it wasn't working well. So definitely, I felt like was some of the things that Luka didn't do well in this series. And we got a couple of comments here, and they kind of follow along. So Daniel Berry says, "Evening, good evening, Daniel Berry, man. Appreciate you stopping by, checking in with us." And then AP in the building says, "Stopping by to say what's up." And Luka need to pass the ball. It's Boston versus Luka. It definitely looked like that. So I'll talk about the rest of the Dallas players now.
Cool.
So I know you probably can see the stats on those guys. I'll give people a little insight from, seeing it and everything. So Kyrie Irving disappeared. Minute 0 of the game, he disappeared. He was never a factor in the game. He was just there. He wasn't, it just didn't look like him. It didn't look like what we'd seen from him. I don't know if maybe the finals got to him a little bit. A lot of the other guys, same situation. They just weren't able to make plays. I mean, this is not – the finals is a whole different animal. Once you get to the finals, you're playing against the best players in the world, right? And the best team of best players. So you got guys that are hungry. They're fighting for a championship. For all 4 other guys to only have 39 points is crazy. Luka had 1 assist. They only managed 9 assists, which is the lowest amount of assists in a finals game since the shot clock era was invented.
That's a pretty low number.
How bad they were. So what?
I said that's a pretty low number, man.
Oh yeah, that was like 5 lower, because I think their lowest during the season was like 14 or 15. So it's like 5 or 6 lower than their lowest input throughout the season. That's how bad this was. Boston had a lot to do with it, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute. But I want to kind of break it up a little bit just so we could talk about like who did what.
Mm-hmm.
Not really much else to talk about Dallas, right? They did win the fourth quarter by like 3 points, but they were down like 23 going into the fourth quarter. So, not really a lot of positives that Dallas could take, except for it's only 1 game. So we'll flip over to the other side, and this will be a very simple conversation here. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Kristaps Porzingis. I know you probably have the stats there, co-host, but if I remember correctly, I think Tatum had 16, Brown had around like 18, and then Porzingis had 20. And it's off the top of my head. I didn't pull up the stats, but this is off the top of my head, somewhere around there. But they stretched the ball out. They scored. You got some big shots from Al Horford within the play of the game. Derek White coupling good shots. You had a lot of guys contributing. It wasn't give Luka the ball and let him go. It wasn't give Jason Tatum the ball, let him go, or give Jaylen Brown the ball and let him go. It was a team effort. Very important in order to win a team game, to have team effort. And, we talk about all this pressure being on Jason Tatum and whatnot, and that's not necessarily incorrect. There's pressure on Jason Tatum. I think everybody understands that there's pressure on Jason Tatum. He's been around like 7 years. He's been to the finals before, but he hasn't won anything.
Yeah.
And we talk about people being like faces of the league, and we throw all these guys up as faces of the league. One thing about faces of the league, by year 7, they've ascended. They're kind of, I'm that guy, and everybody knows that. And while Jason Tatum is what I would say one of the faces of the league, I don't think he'll ever be the face of the league. I think the time for him to establish that's past. And I think we're now going to be looking at guys like SGA, Anthony Edwards. Some of those guys are a little bit younger that don't exist within the tail end. Well, they will not exist, but their best years don't exist within the tail end of LeBron. And a lot of people don't like when I say this, but I don't care. It's Steph Curry era. And I do say both, because there was a time when, everybody was Steph Curry this and Steph Curry that, just like LeBron. So let's not forget that they kind of coexisted in this era. LeBron was a little bit first, but that's because he started playing in professional ball when he was like 16. I'm joking, y'all. 18 though, but he started early, so he didn't go to college. So he was in that situation where he was kind of just in the middle. Mm-hmm. So you went from high school to the pros, so you had more years. But Curry, to me, was a big part of this era as well. And those who don't agree with that, argue with somebody else, because I don't care. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting, right? Because you never know how guys are going to react. I mean, we talk about Boston and how they've been here several times, and there's always kind of this assumption of if you keep getting there, eventually you're going to get over the hump. But sometimes people don't, right? There's some guys who just never get over the hump. They just can't put together that series that they need to get there, right? And so I actually think that there is a lot of pressure on Boston from that standpoint, right? Because it's almost like if you're Dallas, there's pressure for you being in the finals, but you don't necessarily have that pressure of like people expect you to go out and win, right? Whereas Boston, it's like, hey man, when are you gonna get over the hump? When are you guys gonna do something? When is Jason Tatum going to step up and be that guy? Right? Y'all have been the best team in the league all year. You should win this series, right? The expectations are all on Boston to actually go out and perform. So the question is, are you a championship team? Because championship teams don't melt under that pressure. Championship teams go out and show out, right? And look, you went out and you did your thing in game one. You got to do it 3 more times in this series, though, right? And so far, every series in this playoff, we've seen Boston let their guard down. We've seen them give games away. So it's reasonable to expect they're going to do the same thing in this series. They've done it every time up until now. There's no reason to believe they're going to suddenly change it, right? So for me, it comes down to when you're looking at the pressure aspect, I think a lot more pressure is actually on Boston from that standpoint. Where the pressure is on the Mavs, it's now all of a sudden your role players, those are the guys for Dallas that might tend to shrink because they've never been here, right? Whereas Boston, they've had a lot of their guys have at least been here before, right? So for Dallas, those are the guys that you're worried about shrinking. Those are the guys you're worried about having the pressure. And last night, I think what we saw was, and we talked about this before the series, Kyrie and Luka are kind of at this point where if one of them isn't having a great night, the other can step up. And I think with Luka, it was not only is Kyrie not having a great night, but nobody's having a great night looking at the stats, right? So now all of a sudden Luka feels like it's the finals. I have to put the team on my shoulders. I have to go do it all. And that's not winning basketball. And Luka has done a great job this year of getting away from that hero ball and playing within the confines of the team. But based on what I'm seeing and what you're telling me, it sounds like last night he kind of went back to playing hero ball because he didn't see anybody else stepping up and he felt like that's what he had to do.
Yeah, I said it's part of it. I don't think that. Well, I can't say that because people have different thought processes. For me and most of the people I talk to, I don't really feel there's any pressure on Dallas because a lot of people didn't expect them to be here. So you're at this point, you're really playing with house money. You want to win when you get there, and obviously, both teams want to win. But I think when you honestly look at this, you say to yourself, all right, Dallas was the team that kind of slid in here, right? We expected Boston. Boston was the best team in the NBA. I'm about to say NFL, everything about football. They were the best team in the NBA all season, right? They were the number 1 overall. They get to their I said a couple of series ago that a team that was really celebrating when Minnesota beat Denver was Boston. Because Boston, like, we ain't got to go up against them to win a championship. Cool, right? Because that team is built in a way that they would give Boston trouble. I think the thing with this particular Dallas team, and I have talked about this some, but I'm going to dig into it a little bit more, is it's dependent on Kyrie being the facilitator, right? Luka had some games where he's performed really well, but in order for this team to really play at its best, Luka has to pull back some. You having 30 points and your team getting drugged doesn't do anything for morale, doesn't do anything to make those guys play harder in game 2. You've got to learn, like some of those players learned. First couple of quarters, y'all get yours. If I need to have a little thing where I score like 5 or 10 real quick to keep us in the game, but I want you guys to get your shots. I want you to be involved in the game. I want you to get the reps. I want you to feel like you're part of the game plan. Mm-hmm. And you take over the fourth. Luka took over the first, right?
Right.
And then Porzingis just came out like crazy, so they had a big part to do with it too. In the chat, we got the man behind Real Wise Radio himself, Mr. Wise from Stuck in My Mind. He says, "Hello, gentlemen. What's up, bro? Appreciate you stopping through and rocking with us." And I got to be honest, man. I know you're not a fan of Boston, but I do believe Boston's going to win this series. I said that from before the series started. Nothing changed my mind because of game 1. Defensively, so I want to talk about Boston defensively. The switching, the ability to just impose their will defensively after running the floor like gazelles on offense whenever they got the opportunity was very impressive. I saw several times where they swung the ball all the way around and couldn't get a shot because the switching was so good. And then when they did try to pop inside to get a shot, here comes Porzingis, here comes Jaylen Brown, whoever else blocking the ball or at least altering the shots, making things difficult. It was a very impressive defensive showing. Just guys in the face, guys not getting open, not falling into the old double team Luka because he's having a good game. Oh, no, let him shoot. If he scores 30, 40 points and they still lose, it doesn't matter. Yeah. And that's kind of what they did. They realized early on that other guys weren't really on. So we want to win this game. Stay on everybody else. Let Luka be Luka. Hopefully he plays the way he did. The Luka last year, 2-3 years ago, and not the Luka we have been seeing so far. You've got to find a way to get guys involved when you're down, right? And not and shooting threes and everybody shooting threes when they're down is not a good move. Jason Kidd even said himself, we don't want to make this a game of threes. We want to make this a game of twos. Guess what? Boston made this a game of threes, and they made a lot of them. But they also took the ball inside when necessary as well. This is for all the chips. If guys aren't locked in right now, you got some more overhauling that you might need to do in the offseason if you want to get back to this point and be successful. But again, I'm not going to sit here and say the series is over after one game. I'm not one of those over sensationalist people, right? They did their thing. They made it happen in game 1. They're supposed to win. They're at home. Mm-hmm. So unlike a lot of other series, we actually had the home team say, hey, I'm at home. You're not going to come here and beat me. So the question is, does Boston step up and do this again? Does having Porzingis back to pop that 20 in, which they won by, make a difference? Yeah. Or does Boston fall backwards? So the answer to that question, I think we haven't seen the Porzingis Boston in the playoffs since what? I think he got hurt in game 2. He pulled his calf in the first round. Yeah. So he was out before they started giving away games. So maybe his contribution, maybe the length, maybe the defense, maybe his scoring prowess, because you can't put your first or second best defender on him. He's getting your third best defender at best. So maybe that's a difference maker in this series. You know, maybe it's a difference maker in those games that they kind of give away or should have given away. But what I will say is I think Dallas did realize early in that fourth quarter this game was over. And I'm not one that's tied to the score. I'm not tied to, they beat them by 20. They beat them by 25. They just dog whooped them. Because there comes a point where you kind of say, all right, well, you know, you dog whooped us now. We ain't coming back. Yeah. It is what it is. Yeah. Even though they did outscore them by 3 in the fourth, I felt like about halfway through that fourth, Dallas started to realize that it wasn't going to be their game. They tried to shoot some threes. They tried to, you know, push back in a little bit. At one point, they got it down, I believe, in the third quarter, but then the lead built back up, and they kind of hung on to it for the fourth. Boston did. So that's what you do to win, right? It wasn't the prettiest game because there's a lot of missed threes at times, a lot of just kind of questionable plays on both sides. But Boston did more than enough to handle business like they should have. They got to win in game 1.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, at the end of the day, what matters is game two, right? Boston came out, they did what they needed to do, they won game one. The question is, are you going to come out, repeat what you did in game one, have it the same kind of game, and take game two, or can Dallas get game two? Because that's really Dallas's only goal, right? I mean, if you're Dallas, if you went into this series and you said if we can get one of the first two games, we're happy, right? So if Dallas can go get game two, they don't care that they lost by 18 points in game one. But I do think that at least part of it had to be the play of Porzingis, because no one would have anticipated that this dude, after such a layoff, was going to come back with no game time, like anything to get some of the rust off, nothing. Just literally walk out first half of his first game back since pretty much like the beginning of the playoffs and play that well. No one would have anticipated that.
Yeah, I agree. He wasn't able to do as much in the second half, but didn't need to do as much because of the contributions in the first. And I was one of those people who thought he would give him a good 15 to 20 minutes, right? Because just coming back, you don't want to overdo it too soon. And that's about what he gave him.
You just thought it'd be
out. Yeah, he just, he didn't have a ring rust, but then as the game went on, you could kind of see, like, he was a little burned out. He didn't have that stamina back up yet.
Them legs got a little wary.
Shots got a little, arms got a little weak, shots got a little short. But I mean, you expect that to happen at some point. The fact that he was able to do what he did, especially early when they needed it to get that first big run to kind of really put things out of reach early. It's impressive. That was something that I would say I didn't expect either. So, I got to give props where props are due, and I definitely did not expect that from him. So, he outperformed what my expectations were for him in this game. So on the game too, man.
As a Lakers fan, all I can say is Dallas, get it together.
As a non-Lakers fan, hey, Boston, do your thing. On the game two. So for game two, what is your expectation of how game two is going to play out on both sides?
It's hard to say, man, because like I said, but Boston throughout the playoffs has just had these letdown games. And I'm so tempted to think to myself, and look, I will acknowledge the part of this is wanting Boston to lose the series, right? But it's very easy for me to look at where are they likely to have that letdown game. And you winning a game by 18 points is pretty good place to think that might happen, right? So you win big. It's easy to kind of let your guard down just a little bit the next game, right? The other question becomes, really, was Dallas's struggles because of Boston, or was it because of the pressure? Because now you've gone out, you've played game one, you've fallen off, right? You had a horrible game one, you lose by 18 points. If there was any pressure on Dallas at all, like on the role players, you kind of got that out of the way now, right? So now it's obviously not going to be like playing at home, but you should at least have some of that pressure taken off. So you would expect that their role players are going to play better. You would expect that Kyrie's going to play better. I mean, they can't play much worse. So you would definitely expect that they're going to play better. And if Boston comes out and lets their foot off the gas a little bit, that could definitely open the door for a Dallas win. At the end of the day, I said it before, I think Dallas has an opportunity to win this series. Boston is clearly the better team. They're who I think will win the series ultimately. But if I'm just looking at game two, that's what I'm kind of anticipating of. Is Boston going to come out focused and locked in and say, we got to get these first two games? Or are they going to come out with kind of that last days ago, we won by 18, we're good. And then combining that with Dallas playing better than they played game one, it's still a win.
So I feel that perspective. I think we're going to get a Boston team that wants to go up 2-0 and protect their home court. I think we're going to have a more locked-in team. I think Porzingis being there makes a big difference. Him and having another guy who's won a championship that's there. And obviously, I'm not saying Porzingis has won a championship, but it's another guy that has won a championship. Let me make sure I'm clear.
Yeah.
And Drew Holiday. I think Drew Holiday's a major difference maker for this team because he's a settling force. He's a guy that they can listen to that has won. And also, he doesn't really have a lot of bad games. Right. He may have games where he doesn't score as much, but you see the contributions on the defensive end, in the passing game, and the leadership, and being the primary ball handler, so that responsibility doesn't fall on Tatum and Brown as much. And he's a guy that can give it to. He can give you 20, 25. Right. He's not going to do it every night, but he understands the flow of the game. He's very into the flow of the game. If you watch him, hey, nobody's making shots. Let me try to pull up a few and see if maybe I can drop a couple threes. Get to the hole, maybe put a guy in a really nice spot where it's going to be easy for him to make the play. Mm-hmm. And these are things that Boston hasn't had in the past. They haven't had four guys who can get buckets at will, and at some point in time was at least an all-star caliber player or an all-star. Mm-hmm. So when you add those other pieces to what you already had in Boston, they're more than the sum of their parts. I think this is a great fit for Porzingis because, again, he can show up for a spurt, but then they're like, hey, you done what you need to do. It's all good. You can swing over to the other side. Versus if you're on some other teams, you need that to be consistent. But because you have Brown, Tatum, because you have Holiday, you have other weapons, right? So you have those, you've got other bench players. You've got other guys that can give contributions along with that really main four guys. Which is something that helped the Denver Nuggets win a championship last year, not really needing to depend on one or two guys, but having four guys who, at least at times, can step up and make plays. So I think Boston is in a really good position from my perspective for game two. The game where I would look at it and say they're probably going to be the most likely to give it away would be game three. Because if you go up 2-0, you're then going to Dallas, and you're like, yeah, we in Dallas, we got 2 wins. Dallas was like, we back at home. We got to win. Like, if you're down 2-0, game three is a must win. If you don't win game three, you can still win the series. This happened. But even if you look at recent history, you start going down 0-2, you don't win series. Mm-hmm. You might can push it, but you don't win. So you want to get a win in these next 2 games, obviously, if you're Dallas. I think their best bet is going home for game three because, again, I've always been of the opinion that you have the best play out of your role players at home. Right. Home cooking, your bed, your own routine. You kind of in your arena, your spots to shoot from, all those things. Those things aren't in Dallas's favor right now. Those things are in Boston's favor because Boston is at home. Mm-hmm. And I believe that, Dallas has that team that's like, we know we can beat you at home, and we're going to beat you at home. But we've also got to be able to travel and beat you unless we're going to beat you just the 4 games at home. Right? So I think the battle is who's going to win in Dallas. And Dallas is going to find a way at some point in the series to take a game in Boston and make Boston have to beat them in Dallas. So I do think these are teams that can win at home.
Yeah, I mean, it could very well end up being 2-2. And maybe not even necessarily that it's the home and home situation, right? I could see a situation where maybe Dallas steals game 2, but then you're asking them to go win 3 straight games against Boston by winning those 2 at home. That's a big ask. So, even if Dallas wins game 2 in Boston, I still think it would be very reasonable to assume that we're going to get to game 5 2-2, right? Because Boston's is going to steal one of those games back in Dallas.
Yeah, that definitely could happen. I have a different anticipation, but we'll get to that when we're talking about the rest of the series down the road. But I'll say for game 2, I definitely expect Boston to be up 2-0. I think they're going to protect home court. This is the finals. It's all or nothing. You don't want to leave games on the floor, lose a series because you're losing games at home when you got home court. So I think they're going to come out in game 2 and still have their ferocity. But I do believe that they're going to have at least one game where they kind of let it down a little bit. I think that 2-0 lead, belly's going to feel full. Game 3, that's where you could have the issue if you're Boston. Now, on the flip side, let's say by some coincidence, Dallas does win Game 2. And I think going home, Boston's going to have a different sense of urgency going to Dallas. And the best way to take somebody out at home is as early as possible. So that's just, my thoughts on how I think that will go. I think we're going to get 2-1 Boston. I'm anticipating the 2 wins at home, then a loss on the road. Then maybe they get it back together for Game 4. Maybe not. But, it's not going to be Dallas lost Game 1. So now Boston's just going to go out and spank them the next 3 games, and it's going to be a sweep and the series is over, or it's going to be a gentleman's sweep. I think it's going to go further than that. But kudos to Boston for coming out with a really strong game plan. And I don't say that at all about Boston, but a really strong game plan and executing it properly. Can't really say much more about the impressiveness of that.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, so good people, we are going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to slide back, and we're going to talk about a few other things that happened, one of which, of course, is that ginormous Justin Jefferson contract. We have to discuss that. So let's go.
Let's do it.
Hey, Eagles fan. Join my man, Cool McCain, and a host of others as they break down every single game, every single week in an objective manner, and also from a fan's perspective as well. Remember, this cast feels just like you. Nobody likes you. And you don't care. Fly, Eagles, fly. Eagles Elite Podcast. Every Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern on YouTube and other podcast outlets. Cool McCain.
You thought you wanted Gunther against Chad Gable, but you didn't. And I'm going to tell you why. Chad Gable would take everything that Gunther's done and bury it.
The Playmaker.
It was on site. AJ Styles walked out there, seen LA Knight. Oh, okay. And then LA Knight hopped out the car. Let's go.
Break down everything in TNA, AEW, and all of the WWE programming. Join these two kings, monarchs of wrestling, live every Monday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Central on the PlayCallers Sports Talk YouTube channel.
All right, good people. So we are back. So one of the things that we have to discuss is, of course, we got to talk about this contract. Justin Jefferson.
The bag.
Crazy. Yeah, Justin Jefferson basically lube. You normally get lube, no Vaseline. My man got a 4-year, $140 million extension, $110 million guaranteed. But here's the part that I think if you're going to get this kind of money, it's smart. $88.7 million due at signing. So you ask, well, what do you mean? How's that smart? Remember, young quarterback. You could put that money in right now, and it doesn't hurt you long term because a lot of his money is in the front facing. So by the time you get to where you got to pay your quarterback, this deal, a lot of the big years will be done. But then you run into another problem altogether. It's a 4-year deal.
Exactly.
You could be looking for more of a bag.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts, man?
So here's the thing. First and foremost, shout out to Justin Jefferson getting that bag, right? Arguably the best receiver in the league. I'm gonna say arguably because I do know there's a gentleman in Cincinnati who also wants to lay claim to that title. But definitely up there. For me, I kind of look at this and I go, I get it for them, right? You're asking him to re-sign, stay with the team, when right now his two options at quarterback are Sam Darnold and a rookie that we have no idea what he's going to be or not be. Right? So look, and I don't say this necessarily as an offense to JJ McCarthy or Sam Darnold, but the reality is you got to pay me a premium if I'm going to potentially have my numbers be down for a couple years while you develop this young guy, or you got Sam Darnold back there. Right? You got to pay me a premium for that. They have that luxury that they don't have to pay a lot of quarterback money right now. Right? And I believe the Sam Darnold is only 1 year anyway, so they can easily just move on from him next year, have McCarthy, then they got a couple years on a rookie deal. So it makes a lot of sense from that standpoint for them to go ahead and do it, right? But I think where the problem is going to come in is now you're going to have some other guys in the league that's going to go, I want to get that money too, right? A CD Lamb's going to want that kind of money. And Dallas is in a different situation because they got to figure out what they're going to do with Dak. They got Michael Parsons' contract coming up. They got to pay guys, right? They're not in the same situation as Minnesota. Cincinnati, they've got two really good receivers that both want to get paid. They're probably not going to be able to pay both of them because they already had to pay Joe Burrow. So when you start looking at the ripple effect of this contract, I imagine there are a lot of other teams that are definitely not happy with what Minnesota just when it did.
I'm one of those guys, like you said, congratulations for getting the bag. But yeah, this is going to every time we get one of these contracts, and we understand a lot of times that they're one-offs, agents don't care about that. He's like, hey, he just got this. So what's up? Like CD Lamb, he deserves to be in that same ballpark. Clearly that's what the agent's going to try to do. It depends on where Dallas is going to fall with that and how that's going to work. Like you said, that's one of the guys. And there's several other guys that are looking at this, right? And saying, he got that kind of money. And keep in mind, everybody understands they may not get Justin Jefferson money, but the deal that's under Justin Jefferson and Justin Jefferson, there's a little gray area there. And a lot of people going to want to be in that gray area, if not where Justin Jefferson is at in some cases. So that'll be something to watch because the more you have to start to commit to wide receivers, the more these guys get more outrageous with their requests. And not just a number they're pulling out, but they have a reference point. It just takes away from what you could do for other positions. And speaking of taking away what you can do from other positions because of the wide receiver market flying up. We know this all started with a certain guy in Jacksonville that we're not even going to talk about when he was in Jacksonville. All right, so another article, and I'll have you confirm the accuracy of this because if it happened, I'm sure you know about it. And that's a 2-year, $38 million extension that's been reported for one Christian McCaffrey.
Yes, it is true. Very important caveat for people to understand about this Christian McCaffrey extension. It looks like we gave Christian McCaffrey a huge raise. But what we actually did was push some money very far into the future. So Christian McCaffrey for the next, I think it's 4 years, his salary cap number is under $10 million now. And then that 5th year, it jumps up to like $25 million. Now, I'm pretty sure I haven't seen all the specifics of it, but I'm sure that most of the guaranteed money of the contract is probably within those first 4 years. I doubt very seriously he ever gets the $24 million that's on that 5th year, or that there's even a huge dead cap on that money. But even if there was, there's always the option to, do something to be able to spread that money out over a couple of seasons to make it a little bit easier to deal with, or you're hoping that 5 years from now, the salary cap's so high, it won't even matter. But this is actually a move that while it looks like we paid him more money, and it is going to get him more guaranteed money, about $8 million more than what he was going to get, it's actually very team friendly in the fact that it's lowering his cap number to under 10 million for the next several years.
There you have it from the resident 49ers fan. That's the contract, good people. All right, so we're going to move on here. A couple more things we could talk about, but those were the two main ones. We're going to move on here and do a little discussion of the ACC schedule. I guess we're sort of power ranking is the best way. So we'll just go through the teams and what it looks like the ranking for their schedules are. We keep in mind 17 teams in the ACC starting this year. I think July 1st is when the switch happens and everybody goes to their new conferences. So you hear a couple names up here that you haven't heard before, but keep in mind that's why they're now ACC. Doesn't make any logistical sense, but they are. All right. So, of course, our resident college football guy is Mr. Box, but we can both talk a little college football. It's kind of what we do around here. So at the bottom, it's 17, NC State Wolfpack.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on them being so low on the list, sir?
This is the strength of schedule, right? Like this is like who has the easiest and hardest schedules.
Yes.
Okay.
It's like a strength of schedule power ranking.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so I just had to pull up the other article just so I can make sure I'm clear here real quick. So you look at their 2024 schedule. They got Western Carolina, Tennessee, Louisiana Tech, at Clemson, Northern Illinois, Wake Forest, Syracuse, at Cal, Stanford, Duke, at Georgia Tech, and at North Carolina. I mean, really, you tell me outside of Clemson and North Carolina and maybe Georgia Tech, where are the guaranteed losses at on the schedule?
I think Cal's a possibility.
I say guaranteed, sir. I mean, and when I say guaranteed, I mean obviously it's nothing's 100% guaranteed, but it's like the games that you will mark as a loss, right?
Yeah. There's not a lot of them that you would even say you expect them to lose, so it doesn't make sense to have the ranking that they have. All right, and then right above them, we've got the Virginia Tech Hokies.
Yeah, at Vanderbilt. Okay. Oh, I thought you were gonna say something. At Vanderbilt, Marshall, at Old Dominion, Rutgers, at Miami, at Stanford, Boston College, Georgia Tech, at Syracuse, Clemson, at Duke, and Virginia. So, you know, a couple of tougher games. You got to go to Miami. You got to play Boston College. You also play Georgia Tech. You also play Clemson. You get them at home. Duke, we don't know what they're going to be without their quarterback this year. So I'm not really going to put them up there until we actually see them on the field, but it's kind of understandable why they're ranked so low.
Yeah, and we're calling Miami a tough game. From what we've seen from Miami the last couple of years, it's kind of laughable. So yeah, I mean, it could be kind of tricky, but definitely not a tough game. At least from what they've given us so far. We only go on history. All right, so right above them at 15, we've got the Tar Heels.
Mm-hmm.
They're the first team on this list that actually played your Seminoles, right? I mean,
yeah. I mean, listen. So at Minnesota, they got rid of App. They had App State last year. They got Charlotte instead. North Carolina Central, James Madison, at Duke, which I mean that's a rivalry game, right? So Pittsburgh, Georgia Tech, at Virginia, at Florida State, Wake Forest, at Boston College, and then NC State. Now, I feel like NC State's always a tough team. Boston College at home is always a tough out, and you got to come to Florida State. If it weren't for those three games, this should have been the 17 schedule. because outside of those games, the schedule is weak. They don't even play Miami or Clemson this year.
So our first new entry at number 14, the SMU Mustangs. So I'll give you their schedule real quick, right?
Okay.
At Nevada, then they play Houston Christian, BYU, then TCU, Florida State. All those games are at home. They go at Louisville, at Stanford, at Duke. Then they get Pittsburgh at home, Boston College at home, at Virginia, and then Cal to finish the season. Your thoughts?
My thoughts are that, if we're being completely honest, there's a very realistic chance that you may only lose to Florida State in Louisville. And possibly Boston College could be tough. But that's about it. Like that you've only really got like 2, maybe 3 top losses on the schedule.
Yep, but next at 13, Louisville.
Yeah, I mean Louisville. I mean, this is a team that was in the ACC championship game last year, right? But they got Austin Peay, Jacksonville State, Georgia Tech, at Notre Dame, SMU, at Virginia, Miami, at Boston College, at Clemson, at Stanford, Pittsburgh, and at Kentucky. So you got a tough out of conference game in Kentucky, right? You got to go to Stanford, which is a good little trip over. You got to go to Notre Dame, to Boston College, and to Clemson. That's pretty tough.
Well, apparently it wasn't as tough as the Wake Forest Demon Deacons, who are 12th, and they played North Carolina A&T, Virginia, Mississippi, and Louisiana. Then at NC State, Clemson at home, at Connecticut, at Stanford, Cal at home, at UNC, at Miami, and Duke at home.
I don't really understand how someone feels that this schedule is more difficult.
I guess I would say it's because they have to go to NC State, who's always plays everybody pretty hard, right? They got to go to Stanford, they got to go to UNC, and they got to go to Miami. So I guess it's saying the amount of like possible good teams in the ACC that they have to go play would be my only guess as to why they're 12th.
But Louisville also plays Miami. They're playing them at home, but they got to go to Clemson, to Notre Dame, and to Stanford.
I'm just giving you my guess, sir. Just giving you my guess. And at 11, we have Syracuse.
I got a different guess, and it has to do with a certain drug being in a can. That's my guess.
The Tony Khan powder. So at number 11, we got Syracuse. They have Ohio, Georgia Tech, Stanford, Holy Cross all at home. Then they go at UNLV, at NC State, at Pitt, Virginia Tech at home, Boston College at home, California at home, Connecticut at home, and Miami at home. So see why they're not higher.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm just gonna say pretty much keep it moving.
Yes, sir. At number 10, we got the same Pitt Panthers we just talked about. Oh, man, I don't even know how they team. I'm gonna be real. Like, same thing you were just talking about, Tony Storm powder. Tony Khan powder. We got Kent State at Cincinnati, West Virginia, Youngstown State at North Carolina, California at home, Syracuse at home, at SMU, Virginia at home, Clemson at home, at Louisville, at Boston College.
Listen, the
I
fact
don't even see a lot of losses in there.
You say what?
I don't even see a lot of losses in there at all.
This I'm gonna say this. The fact that this is considered by someone to be pretty much like a middle of the road difficulty schedule in the ACC is exactly why people talk so negatively about the ACC.
I'm gonna just move on. Number 9, Florida State. All yours, sir. I know you're the Florida State guy. All yours.
I'm going to take a slightly different approach with this one, just because it's my team and I know a little bit. You got to go to Ireland for the Georgia Tech game. Then you're going to come back, no bye week after the Ireland trip. You get it one extra day, turn around and play Boston College, who always plays you tough. Fortunately, the game is at least in Tallahassee, but that is a little bit of a concerning game, right? If you're a Florida State fan coming off of that trip from Ireland. Then you get Memphis, who, is not a slouch team. They're not obviously Florida State, but they are one of those teams that could potentially get you if you give them a chance to stick around. Get a chance at Cal. Go to SMU. Get Clemson, at Duke, at Miami, North Carolina, at Notre Dame, Charleston Southern, and then Florida. You get at home. So obviously, Clemson, Miami, in Florida, you get those 3 every year. They're always going to be tough matchups. And then you throw in at Notre Dame, you throw in the Ireland trip, and the fact that they get Boston College when they come back without really much of a break. I think this is actually tougher than this number 9 ranking. I think it should be higher up on the list, personally.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, we'll move on to number 8. Got the Miami Hurricanes. Make this real simple. At Florida, Florida A&M at home, Ball State at home, at USF, Virginia Tech at home, at Cal. So we got to travel across the country for that one. At Louisville, Florida State at home, Duke at home. We got to go to Georgia Tech, Wake Forest at home, and then we go to Syracuse to end the season. It's a difficult schedule, but any schedule is going to be difficult for Miami until they do a better job of solidifying consistency. We do have a new quarterback, Cameron Ward, but we'll see how he does in Miami, because one of the things about Miami is I'm fine with their ranking because they're going to make some of those games harder than they probably should be, and Lord forbid we lose one. But I'm not even going to waste the digression to go into that whole situation today. I'm just going to move on to number 7. We got the Clemson Tigers at number 7. They have Georgia, App State, North Carolina State, Stanford. Then they go on the road to Florida State, then to Wake Forest, back home for Virginia, Louisville, at Virginia Tech, at Pittsburgh. They play the Citadel at home and South Carolina at home. 1, 2. There's at least 2 or 3 bunnies in there, but they do have some difficult ones. So I don't have a problem with ranking. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is about right. I mean, obviously, a lot of the strength of this is you're looking at games against Georgia and at Florida State, but Louisville, NC State are also tough matchups, and then you have your in-state rivalry against South Carolina at the end of the season.
Very true, very true. And then number 6, Virginia Cavaliers, Richmond at Wake Forest, Maryland at Coastal Carolina, Boston College, Louisville at home, at Clemson, UNC at home, at Pittsburgh, at Notre Dame, SMU at home, and then Virginia Tech. That's a little difficult.
It is a little difficult, but this is like a good example when I say that Florida State should be a little higher, because they both play Boston College, they both play Clemson, they both play Notre Dame, right? But the rest of Florida State's schedule is tougher than the rest of their schedule. So I think this is a team that, while this is a kind of a tough schedule, should probably be down the list a little bit.
Okay. Then number 5, we got Cal, first year in the ACC, our second joinee. Their 2024 schedule, UC Davis. Then they go to Auburn, San Diego State, then at Florida State. They play Miami at home, at Pittsburgh, NC State at home, Oregon State at home, at Wake Forest. And they play Syracuse, Stanford at home, and then at SMU. So I'll say this. I think one of the reasons why theirs is higher is because they're from the other coast and they've got to travel when they literally are at the other side for the most part. So I think it may have something to do with them being as high as they are on the list. Just my 2 cents.
No, I agree with you. I mean, looking at the fact that they got to go to Auburn, fly back to play San Diego State, go back to Tallahassee, come back home, play Miami, then go to Pittsburgh. I mean, that's a lot of travel. Definitely gonna be brutal.
Yep. All right. So we do have a couple of more teams. So we're just going to run through those guys real quick. I don't think we have a problem with this top 4. It's just a matter of give you guys the info real quick. So we got the Boston College Eagles 4 at Florida State, Duquesne at Missouri, Michigan State, Western Kentucky at Virginia Tech, Louisville, Syracuse at SMU, North Carolina, and Pitt. You have any problems with their ranking?
I think the only reason they're honestly this high is because there's maybe low expectations for them this year. And so it's like it's a tough schedule for them, but this isn't really a tough schedule per se.
Okay. And then number 3, we got the Stanford Cardinals, the third of the new teams. So they are at they start the season TCU, Cal Poly, then at Syracuse, at Clemson, Virginia Tech at home, at Notre Dame, SMU, at Wake Forest, at NC State, Louisville, at Cal, and at San Jose State. I think the same thing as I said about
you got travel and you got some,
but your thoughts?
Yeah, you got travel and you got some tough matchups here. So yeah, I don't have a problem with this one.
Yeah. All right. And number 2, we got the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. They're 2024. Florida State, Georgia State, VMI, Notre Dame before they go on the road. Then at Georgia, Duke, Miami, North Carolina State at home. At Louisville, UNC at home. At Syracuse, at Virginia Tech.
I just want to know who's at number 1 then. Jeez.
That does sound like a tough schedule. Number 1 is the Devils of Duke. So they're
we know who Duke's playing, but there's no way it's tougher than what Georgia Tech's facing, bro.
All right, so Duke's 2024 schedule, they have Elon at Northwestern, Connecticut at Middle Tennessee State, North Carolina at home, at Georgia Tech, Florida State at home, SMU at home, at Miami, at North Carolina State. They play Virginia Tech at home, and then Wake Forest is their season ending game. And I don't see that schedule being harder than Georgia Tech. I don't.
Yeah, Georgia Tech has the hardest schedule. It's not even close. I don't even know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just wild. But that is what it is. But I definitely would have to say Georgia Tech is definitely the one with the hardest schedule. I can't really argue against that. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll catch up on some WNBA next week. Kind of wanted to go through the schedule here. Maybe we can pull on other conferences next week and kind of, start getting people into that college football feeling because it's coming. It's coming. All right, man. So for your boy Cool McCain and Stephen Box, Mr. Box himself, this is the PlayCallers. There's 2 things we're going to end with, but Box, any words before I get to those?
It's football season, baby. Let's go.
Yes, sir. Make sure you tell 4 of your friends and 4 of your enemies. Just because they don't like you does not mean they won't like us. And good people, it is never where you start. It is always where you finish. And we out.
The PlayCallers.